Okay, so we've got it's myself here. I'm Joe Schneider. I'm the president of Dojo Five. I got Brandon Laren with me today, and he is our delivery lead for EmbedOps. We want to talk a little bit about CI and modernizing embedded development, and how you do that in a firmware environment, and how that can revolutionize what you're doing. So first step, why do I care? What we hear over and over again is that firmware complexity is increasing exponentially, and expectations for what firmware needs to do, for what products need to do, is just kind of going gangbusters. Customer expectations about what all these products, whether it needs to connect to the internet, or whether I've got internet stack on my device now, I need to keep it secure. I need to monitor it. Understand what's going on in the field. There's a lot of different pieces, a lot of complexity that we've gone a long way from. It needs to blink a few lights, and there's just a lot of complexity with that. And what we hear time and time again is products aren't stuck. They're not behind schedule because of the mechanicals. They're not behind schedule because of the electrical. They're not behind schedule because of the industrial design, ID, anything. It's because the software is buggy. It's behind schedule. We're struggling to get those last couple of features in. They're just the team is behind almost before it started, and that's what we're seeing is a big issue. And EmbedOps, DevOps can help with that. So, is it really that bad? DevOps concepts, if you're not familiar with them, have kind of revolutionized the mobile and web development worlds. But as I've said a lot, embedded is using decades-old development methods. We're kind of stuck in the dark ages in embedded, and it really can be better. A couple of surveys that I have referenced down at the bottom there that have done surveys specifically of the embedded market, and there is there is evidence that we're improving, but very slowly. Most companies do use source control, but gosh, that's a low bar. And only half of us are even using CI and automated test builds, which really is low-hanging fruit. And it really can bring a lot of value to what you're doing. Now, what could implementing this do for my team? I've always kind of been skeptical because where's the data? How do we know that this actually helps? Is it just kind of a pie in the sky type of thing, right? But no, it does actually help. And what we've seen is 8x increased time for innovation, a decreased overall development cost by 40%. It helps you quickly reproduce build environments for debugging. And this isn't just hearsay. A lot of what I'm bringing here is recorded in a great book about HP and how they transformed LaserJet firmware development at HP. So go check out that book. It's one of the best sources I've been able to find with scientific data around how does CI really help you in your development, right? Bring more time for innovation. In this book, I don't have it on the slide, but they found that at the beginning of their CI journey, only 5% of the time of their firmware developers was being spent on innovation and new features. And I have a feeling that sounds familiar to a lot of people. We've got so many things that need to get on the roadmap, and it's all the crap that doesn't actually have to do with building new features that's getting in the way of this. So how can we do this better? And why don't people do this? It is so obvious. What is the problem here? Why don't people do this and just adopt this? Well, one of the biggest pieces of this is that it's not just about slapping on a tool or throwing some scripts together. It's that culture change is hard. DevOps requires an investment, and it is in some of the automation and the tooling, but it's also in the culture change piece. What I've got here is there's a great book on DevOps, kind of one of the seminal books that people go to, kind of told in a kind of a parable fashion, but it's called the Phoenix Project. And the idea, it's all about kind of DevOps and how it kind of transforms a company. But there's another company called Tech Beacon that I grabbed some information from that they kind of do consulting based on DevOps. And they had 400 teams perform kind of a in-person simulation based on this project. And what they found is that the common failure themes were typically around failure to instill that culture, failure to apply continual learning and improvement, and failure to move the focus from features to outcomes. And so it just kind of reiterates that, like, a lot of times it's not because, I didn't have the right, script in place, or it's not because I didn't have, it's because, did your team really fundamentally change how they're going to work? If you can do that, then you get these types of results that we're talking about on this page. You get 8x increased, up to this, and this is huge. This is significant. By the end of this, the HP kind of journey that they were on, they were seeing their teams were spending, upwards of 40%, 50% of their time on new innovation. What does that mean for your roadmap? What does that mean for getting your products out on time? So I've been talking a little bit about DevOps. For the folks who don't know, kind of just base level, what does this DevOps thing mean? Generically, it's a set of tools and techniques that helps your team rapidly, reliably, repeatedly build, deploy, and maintain products for your customers. It typically includes a visualization of kind of a pipeline, and there's typically a plan step, a code step, a build step, a test step, a release, and then you're kind of into, okay, now we're deploying, now we're operating, monitoring. And a lot of that is, there are tweaks to this model for embedded. There are, as I mentioned before, there are many web and mobile companies that have adopted DevOps ideas, and they have blazed a trail. And some of that trail is easily followed by some parts of the embedded journey, and some of the parts just don't make sense and don't directly translate to embedded. And that's why really we kind of saw an opportunity for EmbedOps. So EmbedOps is really our flavor of DevOps specifically focused on embedded, a set of tools and techniques that helps firmware teams rapidly, reliably, repeatedly build, deploy, maintain their hardware products for their customers, designed by and for firmware developers. This allows you to spend your team's time wisely. You can focus on features, not infrastructure, and really hone in on what is that percentage of time you want to be spending on innovation and new feature development, and what will really kind of move your roadmap forward for your team, your innovation team. Building a tool in-house unfortunately doesn't change your culture, and that's kind of what we see a lot of times, is that there's a company that grabs an intern, they grab an open source tool, which is a great way to start, but then they get kind of a flavor of it. They're able to understand, like, oh yeah, I got a taste of this. This seems really good. I can kind of make this work. But then it kind of fizzles out. They don't change the culture. They kind of miss that piece of what is really necessary to change what you're doing in EmbedOps. And then we made EmbedOps because we saw that it did improve firmware teams, and it's hard to do well. There's a lot of pieces, that translation from the mobile and web world to the firmware and hardware world. Some of those pieces, yeah, not too big a deal. Some of those pieces, really big deal, and still a big deal today when you try to kind of slap a solution together. So that's why we put it together. And with that, we got a little demo now from Brandon, who's going to show us a little bit about EmbedOps and what that can mean for you.
Thanks, Joe. We're going to jump right into the point where you're a new team. You've been onboarded to EmbedOps. We've talked with you. We understand what you are doing with your builds. So maybe it's a GCC ARM build. Maybe it's a IAR build. Any of the typical stacks. We've talked with you about that. We know what you're doing for testing, and any quality checking, like CPP checks like that. We go off, we do our magic, we get your development environments ready for cloud-based builds. So like Joe said, we really take advantage of modern tooling. The example that I'm showing right now is in GitLab, where we have gone off and done the work to create your pipeline, create the development environment and the containers around that pipeline. And now we are creating a pull request into your system that is actually showing your build and the results from it, the CPP check results and your testing results. And if you're not at the point where you have some of these tools, we have off-the-shelf environments that we can recommend that are best in class. I mentioned Google Test over here in this example, but we support things like Seedlane, Catch2, and as new things come up, we're developing new versions of those. So this would be an example of we've created the PR. You're going to be able to see that this is the feedback that you're going to be able to get. And as soon as you accept this into your repository onto your team, every time somebody on your team makes a change and pushes that change to get to version control, you're going to be getting this feedback. So a lot of these things you would be doing normally, locally, and maybe you have some automation built around it, but it's not happening as consistently and your whole team is not getting the feedback. And in my experience, when you have this feedback that you're getting, every day as changes are being made, you find stuff a lot faster and people start seeing the value more when they can say, oh yeah, that test that I wrote last week is still checking stuff today. It is being run, and our team is getting that value. So as you onboard, we provide these. You don't need to develop any of the containers, any of that pipeline, and you can just start using it. Typically, one of the first things that happens, though, is that you're getting this feedback and you have some sort of a, say, test failure, and you want to run that locally because you need to do some iteration. So in order to make it easy to run the same test environment locally, or really any of these steps locally, we've developed a command line tool called EmbedOps CLI. It's a Python-based tool that will run on your computer. I'm going to show a quick example of this. So I'm sitting inside of one of my repositories right now, so I can pull up the CLI and do jobs show. What this is going to tell me is what EmbedOps jobs have been configured for this. So these would be the same list of jobs that you would see on your cloud-based, say, GitLab, Bitbucket, GitHub, Azure DevOps system. In this case, for the example here, I only have one job that's been configured. It's a build job. And if I want to execute that, I can just run that job. And what that's going to do is run this build job or test job or whichever job in the same manner that it would run on the cloud-based CI system. So the first thing that it does is it goes out and gets a Docker container, the same Docker container that's run out in the cloud-based builds. And in this case, it went very quickly because I already had that container cached, which is by design. And then it's going to jump in and do the build. In this case, it's doing a STM32 build. And you're going to see the same results that you would see on the cloud-based system. One thing to point out here is that this is all running with that Docker image, the same Docker image that's out on the CI system. It's not using GCC from my local system. It's using all of those tools that are in that EmbedOps developer environment for whatever tool you're running. So if I have a different version of GCC, it's fine because it's using the one that's configured and set up in your source control itself when we created those pipelines for you. Similarly, if you go back, 6 months previous and do a build from source control, it's going to use whatever developer environment that was set up back then. So you can recreate a build from 6 months ago or whenever, just by updating to that in version control and running the build. That's one of the main advantages of using that containerized EmbedOps development environment, is that it's running the same thing, whether it's in the cloud on the CI build, locally on your system, and then over time, it's also running the same build that you had configured previously. So with that, I'm going to switch back. One of the things here that you see is it's dumping out some flash code sizes. You'll see a little bit more on that. That's a part of the development environment that for all the compilers, we have it dumping out that information so you can get that information locally and on your CI runs. Okay, so now we have the CLI that's running the same thing that you have on your pipeline. You can run all of those tools like that. The next thing that we have is over time, you might want to see the trends on things. So when you're doing CI and you're getting a lot of confidence from your builds, you need to make sure that you're still getting the same test passing that you had before. So a common thing to have happen is that tests get added or removed, and you want to know what those trends are. It's kind of hard to tell that by going back and looking at your cloud-based CI system. So we have a dashboard here in our web application that is showing you the tests over time, and you can look at this by your different repositories or by your the branches within that. So it makes it easy to say, like at this time right here, we had a bunch of tests, and some for some reason they went away. In this case, it's because they moved down here. They were failing tests, and you could go then quickly down to here and link back into your CI system and debug what that issue was. So tests are interesting. Tests are, they give you a lot of confidence in your CI. But the other thing that we have trending over time is that information that I showed you earlier, where we're parsing out the code size, the flash and RAM sizes. We are also presenting that here in the dashboard. That's obviously something very important for a lot of teams that are constrained on their hardware side. So we are showing the flash and the RAM usage over time for all of your builds here. And then the last thing I wanted to point out is that as your journey along the CI environment is changing and you need new stuff, we at the EmbedOps team is available for support. You can ping us. A lot of times we see that there are kind of issues that happen that are related to CI, and it might not be necessarily a compiler issue, but it could be something where GitLab has changed something and you're not familiar with that. Our team is available to support that on a day-by-day basis, and it's amazing how much an hour here or there can add up when you're trying to kind of learn this new system. Whereas our team specializes in the different CI systems and how to debug issues. So EmbedOps, a big part of EmbedOps is that ongoing relationship to make sure that you're getting the jobs that you need and you're getting the feedback that you need. So with that, I will pass it back to Joe.
Awesome. Thanks, Brandon. And yeah, so if something like this looks like something that could help your team, we do free embedded CI/CD pipeline evaluations. You can sign up. There's a QR code there and a link, as well as if you have any other follow-up questions, you can hit hello@Dojo Five, or we have a little time to answer some now. If anyone has any questions, feel free to just kind of add them to the chat. And we'll kind of give it a second. I mean, I think, Brandon, one point to just kind of reiterate maybe is that there's, there's just, let's see, let me figure out how to do this here in the streaming here, but there's so much, I think, that like the reproducible build environment, especially, I think, is something that teams kind of don't necessarily realize the power that's in that. Maybe there's so many times we've heard, you and I especially, in our past lives again and stuff, I've heard the phrase it doesn't build on my machine, or it doesn't work or something. And if that sounds familiar, if you guys have seen, if you're feeling like that's my environment, I've got a team where, reproducible build environments is a constant concern, or, gosh, we've had that problem before. Realize, I think, that, the times you've heard it is probably just the tip of the iceberg. And there's a lot of times you probably haven't heard it. That's, when you think about efficiency of teams, and especially, I guess I'll say, going into a situation where, the economy is a little kind of unstable. Like, what does that mean in terms of your ability to hire as a company? What does that mean in terms of the workload that's ending up on your plate? Because typically companies are seeing, the workload doesn't change. We still need to hit initiatives for the company. We still need to get new stuff out, but I got to get more out of my existing team. And that's where, I think, bringing on a partner that can help you with that culture change piece, so you have long-lasting adoption of what EmbedOps brings to the table, and it can get you started off on the right path, and can also, with best practices and templates and existing success, and then being able to have another team focused on that infrastructure piece, so that your firmware team can stay focused on getting those new features out, getting those new products out. That's where I think that's like a triple, win for a lot of teams that we work with. Anything else to add there, Brandon?
Yeah, no, I would just say the developer environment for some things seems very simple. Like, you have your compiler, you have your favorite IDE, but as you're kind of moving in your journey to adding more of these tools, like a testing framework, like different static analysis tools, those sort of things, it adds on to the number of tools that you have and the environments that you have to maintain. And as soon as you start, like you said, having things like, why is that failing in my CI system? Like, that feedback is great, but sometimes it doesn't match what I can do locally. It makes all of that feedback kind of less valuable, because everybody is kind of questioning it. So having kind of this extra discipline and work, and I guess technical excellence around those developer environments is very important. I guess it's more important than you think it would be, even in my experience. And some of them aren't trivial either. I think of, like, Seedling is a really popular and good testing framework used in embedded, but if you go out and try to install that, it's not a trivial environment to set up. So it seems kind of like, oh, it's a one-time cost, but those things add up, across your development team, and then kind of all the question marks that go into, like, do I have the same environment, for testing as everybody else? So I think that's where the kind of the culture piece comes in, is that the excellence and the recreatability around those, from a developer perspective, is higher than you think it would be. And that's kind of all in addition to, hey, I want to be able to rebuild something from 2 months ago, of our last release, and knowing all of those versions and being confident in it.
Yeah, it's just another way to summarize it. I think that it's really important to have that combination of the culture piece, because, like you say, like, setting up Seedling is difficult, the environment to get it to set up, and then on top of that, you've got the next problem of, like, writing unit tests, if you've never done it before, is actually kind of difficult, and it's a skill set, and it's almost like learning to program again in some ways. And if your team needs a testing solution, if you are really fighting some quality issues, or maybe your team has been excited and engaged about unit testing, but you're thinking as a manager, you're just like, this is going to be a science project for the next 6 months for somebody, and is that really going to, like, move my team forward, or is it going to be just kind of fun for somebody to play around with, but not actually get that transformation that I'm looking for? Like, that's where I think something like EmbedOps can be really valuable, because then you're getting a team that supports you on the culture change, and they bring the tools, so that, like, you get over both the hurdles, right? Of both the technical tool hurdle, and you get over the culture hurdle. And I think those, like, whenever you do one but not the other, if you bring in culture and use, or the carrot and stick method of bringing in culture, where it's more stick, and it's like, we're gonna do CI, it's gonna happen, and you don't bring the technical along with, it's just maybe kind of what you were talking to. Like, if it's hard if I don't have the technical tools in place to facilitate that type of work environment, it's going to be super frustrating for me to be a developer. I'm going to be slower rather than faster. And alternatively, if I've got all the technical tools, but it's not that culture change, it doesn't work either. So it really does need to be that, like, 2 steps at the same time type of, like both feet in, so to speak, right? making that transformation in order for it to work. Yeah, cool. Well, I think that is probably most of what we wanted to cover here. If anyone, as we mentioned, if anyone has any questions or thoughts, feel free to hit us up at hello@dojo5.com. Again, if you've got, no cost, free pipeline evaluation, you just want some thoughts, you want some feedback on what you're doing already, we're happy to do that. But, we do have a limited amount of time. So, go grab more information at our website, dojo5.com. EmbedOps consultation is where we've got kind of a landing page for that. So feel free to reach out at any time. Otherwise, happy to just push the modern embedded forward. Thanks everyone for joining us. Appreciate your time, and hope to see you again.